Should you enjoy your training for the results that it gives you or for the process? Now, this was an interesting topic which came up from Landon from Basement Bodybuilding. I watched his video and it drew up a whole bunch of different scenarios and questions that I've experienced as a coach and as a lifter over the last, what is now 3 decades. I want to just start off by saying, in a nutshell, Faz, just me as the lifter, I agree. I think enjoyment of your training is overrated for me personally. However, as a coach, I do disagree with him. So let's just frame the conversation first of all. What Landon was saying was you shouldn't necessarily prioritize enjoyment of the training process. You should prioritize enjoyment of the results. And you should do what you need to do to ensure you are getting the result. And that is the most enjoyable thing. So I want to just draw up 4 separate topics of discussion which came up in my head out of all this, and hopefully this will give the idea a bit more meat. So firstly, just to expand on the idea, this to me is a little bit like gaming. Weirdly enough, it's a weird analogy, but it's a bit like gaming. I play World of Warcraft. The last time I played it quite competitively was probably 2014. And back then, the only thing that really mattered to me was damage. I think that's it. That's all I cared about. When people would ask questions like, okay, what class do you want to play? The answer in my mind would always be the one that does the most damage. And there was always a whole bunch of people who would say, just play what you enjoy. And I'm sat there thinking, but I enjoy damage. And that's all I enjoy. I don't care the play style. I just want to melt faces and top meters. That's all I'm interested in. And so it's the same for training. Does it matter to you how or what work you need to do to get the results? Or do the results matter? And for me, back then, it was the results that mattered. Now, interestingly, I still play every now and again, but I'm a lot more casual now. And I think my attitude towards gaming now is actually more of how it plays, because I'm not competitive now. And now I'm much more likely to be one of those people who go, actually, I need to enjoy the class. So it's funny how my view has changed so much over the last 10 years. And it's a little bit like with training. Nowadays, I am a little bit less results orientated when it comes to the gym. Right now, I'm much more likely to be one of those people who say, I need to enjoy the process. And I wouldn't say that's the exclusive domain of people who have just been there and done it. There are plenty of people who are in their 20s and 30s who are still building up, but who still want to enjoy themselves. And I think that's okay. As a coach, I work with a lot of those people. Not every one of my clients wants to just get the result for the sake of getting the result. Quite a few of them will have parameters which I need to work within. Parameters of enjoyment, of time, things that they're not willing to compromise on. So that's the first point. First point is there are different personality types. Now, the next point is if you always have to enjoy everything you do, you might not necessarily do everything you need to succeed. Now, you might enjoy bodybuilding. Okay, you might enjoy the process of bodybuilding, but you might hate training legs, right? Maybe that's you. Maybe that's who you are. If you enjoy training your body, growing your physique, but you hate training legs, you are just going to have to learn to grin and bear the leg training. You don't maybe have to enjoy it, but you're going to have to learn to enjoy the results that it gives you in that area. In that circumstance, there are parts of it you're just going to need to sit through and do your best to get the result. So I'll give you an analogy here. I used to be a school teacher, right? And so there was always at least a handful of students in every year group who would turn around and say, actually, sir, I don't see the point in this, so I'm not going to do it. It's always those students who don't really understand the fact that there are parts of a whole which you're not going to enjoy. You might have a dream job that you like going to, you enjoy it, you enjoy what it gives you, enjoy the free time, but you might not like certain aspects of it. You might not like the drive. You might not like the starting time, but everything else is amazing. You're not going to like every single aspect of the whole all the time. It doesn't happen. So the second point I'm making here is when it comes to the conversation about enjoying your training or not, you have to break that down into separate areas. And if You have to enjoy every single thing you're doing. You might not do everything it takes to succeed. So to go back to that teaching example, these students didn't enjoy the entire process and actually point blank refused to do the things they didn't enjoy as part of the whole. They weren't going to succeed with the whole. Nobody enjoys every part of a larger thing that they like. Okay, so I feel like you have to know yourself when it comes to these things. And if it's something which is a part of a larger whole which you enjoy, but it's a small part which you don't enjoy, you're going to have to just come to terms with doing what you need to do in that circumstance to try and get the most out of it. So then you might have to adopt the perspective of, I don't enjoy this, but I'm going to do what I need to do for the sake of getting the result. Now, the final point I want to talk about is if you are of the mentality that you're going to do whatever it takes, if you are on the original perspective that results is the only thing that matters, that may well push you to not listen to your own biofeedback. And that might force you into ignoring aches and pains or signs from your body that has had enough. And that, I think, is something that probably happened to me. So where I was very results orientated, I would do really whatever I needed to do to get the results. So the training that I did when I was at my strongest was absolutely brutal. It was high frequency, high intensity powerlifting training. So multiple squat, deadlift, bench variations every single week. That kind of stuff got me very strong very quick, but it was very injurious because you walk on this tightrope of gains versus injury. And I was walking that line constantly. And that, I think, had I been more receptive to how I was feeling rather than getting the result, I probably would have moderated a lot more when it came to that. So my last point is for the people who say, look, results only, you do have to ensure you're still listening to biofeedback. I don't think it's mutually exclusive, but I think you're more likely to ignore the signs your body is giving you and more likely to ignore signs life is giving you, to pull back. Like maybe your training is taking over your work life or taking over your relationship, but you refuse to acknowledge it because you want the result. I think this is when, doing things for the enjoyment of it is probably a little bit better. So in the end, just to summarize, when I was younger, I would have totally agreed with the original statement to say enjoyment of training is overrated. But as I've gotten older, I've come full circle and I've coached a lot as well. I've realized there's a lot to be said for the enjoyment of training. There's a lot to be said for that in terms of training longevity, in terms of listening to your own feedback to your body. But I also think sometimes, even for activities you really love doing, there are certain parts of that activity where you're going to have to grin and bear it. I hope you found that discussion interesting. Let me know down below, do you love training for what it is? Or do you love training for the results it gives you? And are there different parts of training which you like? Different parts which you just put up with? Let me know. All right, folks. Interesting talk. I'll speak to you in the next one. Take care.